All right, John, you wrote that the Tennessee-Oklahoma game could be a mismatch. Which side?
Where's most of your audience, Dave? Where are most of my subscribers? No, I mean, I've seen Oklahoma Tennessee games going into them thinking they would be a mismatch, and they were, and it was in in Oklahoma's favor. Yeah, I've watched Oklahoma through 3 games now. Its offensive line is troubled. Its wide receiving core, same thing. I think any team, any good team, would have a hard time making up for all the injuries Oklahoma's had, and they've been centered in the offensive line and in the wide receiving core. I thought this was a really good wide receiving core going into the season, and it would match up well against Tennessee's secondary. That to me would be Oklahoma's one of its advantages, a significant advantage. It doesn't have that advantage now. It's had 4 wide receivers hurt. Nick Anderson, probably its best receiver, hasn't played. Maybe he'll be ready for Tennessee. But yeah, that's not a favorable matchup necessarily for Oklahoma now. The other thing is that Oklahoma's offensive line just won't hold up against Tennessee's defensive front. I watched NC State in its opener against Western Carolina and reached the same conclusion. Even though it had 4 starters returning in the offensive line, it wasn't good enough to block Tennessee up front. I don't think Oklahoma is. Oklahoma has a really good offensive line coach of offensive lines, but it lost everybody last year. 2 guys to the NFL draft, another guy who was going to be its best offensive lineman, seemingly, Caden Green, transferred to Missouri. He's from the state of Missouri. So Oklahoma dove into the transfer portal, came up with a new offensive line, and but Branson Hickman, perhaps its best transfer in the offensive line from SMU, was injured in the first game. So it's just had a rash of injuries in 2 areas, and that's the main reason I think it's in for a rough night against Tennessee.
John, yeah, I agree with you. The offensive line versus the defensive line is the biggest, most gigantic mismatch out. I don't think there's any debate about that. I want to ask, though, because it's funny, we were just talking about Nico Iamaleava, and one of these 2 quarterbacks went to SEC Media Days, and it wasn't Nico Iamaleava, it was Jackson Arnold. Now, Jackson Arnold, comparing matchups just at that position real quick, hasn't been bad this year, but is he anywhere close to what Nico Iamaleava can be for Tennessee?
No, I mean, I think in terms of, again, I'm talking potential. He doesn't, Nico wowed me the first time I saw him play a game. Jackson Arnold, though, is really good. I'm not shortchanging him. I think he's got a really nice touch. He's quick. He's a really good runner. He started out in youth league football. He was a running back. And when you see him in the open field, he looks like a running back, not a good quarterback running. He can make a play. He saved Oklahoma against Tulane, 24-19, 3rd and 11. He broke from the pocket and ran 24 yards for a touchdown. That was the play in the game. So I really like him. But I don't think he's as good as Nico. And I also don't think he has nearly as much help as Nico. He's been under duress in these games. I like the way he played. There was, from what I've seen of him, when he is pressured, there's a little bit of that Baker Mayfield quality to him. And I think Tennessee fans can relate to that. When Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma came back from that 17-0 deficit against the Vols in 2015, and Mayfield just won the game in the second half. This is a guy, don't count him out on a play. And I think he will, though. He'll throw some interceptions. He'll force some things. But he's also got that real innate ability to make plays. So I'm not selling him short. I just think Nico has more tools.
John, that comeback by Mayfield was only made possible because of how Butch Jones was so scared to deliver the knockout blow against Oklahoma in that game. I just want to point that out.
Well, I mean, if I don't think we want to get into a debate about Butch Jones's talent or lack. I think that's well established. I mean,
John, I have a line I think you'd be proud of in a column. I said Tennessee could beat Oklahoma like Butch Jones should beat his barber after every trim. Bad haircut. Let's wrap up Butch Jones with this.
You suck, you jackass.
All right, go ahead, go.
Yeah. So sticking with this, I do want to flesh out what Dave talked about, though, because Dave had, this is relevant. Dave has brought up Oklahoma taking care of the football, not like Tennessee hasn't. They're not bad at turnovers, but do you think that's something that would come into play in this game, or is it just is Tennessee do they have such an advantage on the trenches? Do you think it's just not going to matter?
Well, I think they certainly have the advantage, defensive line versus Oklahoma's offensive line. And I think that would be very hard to overcome. I think, again, going back to preseason, when I looked at this game and why I thought Oklahoma could win, I gave a slight edge to Oklahoma. Part of it was that receiving core against Tennessee secondary, which we still really don't know how good the secondary is. We just don't. No. It's done fine, but no competition. So that to me was a distinct advantage. But it's lost that edge. So now we get back to the most obvious thing. You look at that, and Oklahoma's a troubled offensive line. It struggled to convert third downs against Temple in its opening game. I mean, it blew out Temple. It won 51-3 or something of that nature. But it struggled on third down and on some short yardage. That's one of those kind of games where you kind of get, well, Tennessee versus Kent State was an extreme example. But one of those games where you expect to see gaping holes and running backs dancing into the secondary, and you didn't see it that much. Oklahoma certainly won handedly. But yeah, you just can't. That's hard to get past when you look at that. And I'm not, excuse me, overall, this Oklahoma team, even if everything worked out well, this isn't a typical Oklahoma team. Not the one that we're so familiar with for its storied history in the sport. I mean, this is one of college football's iconic programs, all those great players. It just is not at that level right now, even at full strength. And it's not at full strength.
John, as far as Knoxville media, other than one, I respect your eye for football as much as anybody, except for one. And I'm curious. I was talking about me, but Tennessee's defensive line has the advantage over Oklahoma's offensive line. But let's flip flop that. I think Tennessee's offensive line is good too. But there's a part of me, like you brought up with the secondary, of who have they been pushing around?
Yeah. I mean, Oklahoma's got some really good defensive players, and it's got them at every level in their playmakers. Danny Stutzman at linebacker, he's an All-American. You watch that guy play. And they've got several defensive linemen, including a transfer, Deshaun. God, I forgot the guy's name. The lineman from Tennessee, Dejon Terry.
Dejon Terry, yeah, who had transferred from Kansas to Tennessee.
And then went on to Oklahoma. Big 12, SEC. They thought he was going back to Big 12, and then realized, they're in the SEC. But I'm sure it'll work out for him. But he's playing pretty well. And his backup puts more pressure on the quarterback than he does with an interior rush. So I like Oklahoma's defensive front. If Lincoln O'Reilly would have had this kind of defense when he had those lights-out offenses, he might have won it all one year. But so, yeah, I think this will give Tennessee we'll get a really good idea of how good Tennessee's offense is after this game. We think it's great, and it may be, but it hasn't been tested. I don't think this is a game where you can go in and you expect to score 50 points. But you can score in the high 30s, and people are going to say, hey, they're the real deal, because they will be tested in so many ways. And I also think Brent Venables, who's a really good defensive coordinator, won 2 national titles at Clemson in that role, will be able to give Nico some looks and some tricks and gimmicks that maybe Nico hasn't seen. And, he might win some of those battles.
John, I want to address that. I'll remind you, John's appearance brought to you by Newbert Collision Center.
5th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, now saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Newbert Collision Center.
John, I'm actually going to play a little bit of devil's advocate. I think they've seen a different look in that 3-3 stack thing that NC State does. I think they've seen a lot of the twists and stunts and blitzing in practice, because I thought Tim Banks has been underrated, just hadn't had the talent for a couple of years. So I think Nico will be ready. I don't think the mental aspect is a big concern. Do you?
No, I don't think it is, but I also keep in mind, I don't want to make Nico out to be the greatest quarterback of all time just yet. I do still think he needs more reps. I wasn't that impressed, actually, other than that great deep ball he threw against Kent State. I didn't think he was as sharp overall as I've seen him in the other two, as I'd seen him in the other 2 games. I mean, he's not going to be great every play as good as he is. And I just think it's the combination of the things that Brent Venables can do, plus the personnel he has to execute that stuff. And these aren't just talented players on Oklahoma's defense. They're veteran players, a lot of starts. Billy Bowman at safety is a really good player. One of those guys that's really got the instincts for the ball. He intercepted a pass Saturday against Tulane. The ball was deflected twice before he picked it off. So, I mean, that's the epitome of having an eye for the ball. I mean, I'm saying all that, and I'm picking Tennessee to win by 2 touchdowns. So,
on the poll question on YouTube, like John Adams, I believe the Vols Sooners game is a mismatch. Yes, Vols roll with 88%, no close game, 12%. Obviously, our audience is pro Tennessee.
Yeah.
But, John, if they come away from this game with a close win or lose in this college football playoff era that we're in now of 12 teams, it's not really a must win anymore.
No, it's not. I mean, you still got Alabama and Georgia. I mean, everybody looks at 10-2 as a line of demarcation for this playoff. It may not be always, but 10-2, if you can get to 10-2 in the SEC, you got a good shot. So you could lose. Like I said, I expected Tennessee to make the playoff this year, and I expected it to lose to Oklahoma. Now, if you win against Oklahoma, you're set up like, well, just split against Alabama and Georgia, and you're 11-1. Lose both of them, and you're 10-2.